Welcome to Stoic Origin. There is a quiet moment when you realize the room has changed. The smiles feel thinner, the jokes stop landing, conversations end faster when you walk in. No argument, no betrayal, just a shift. And the question hits you hard. Why do they look at me like that now? This video is not here to comfort you. It is here to tell you the truth most people never hear. When people start hating you for no clear reason, it is often the first sign that you have stopped playing a role they depended on. Stoicism has a name for this tension. It is the friction between inner order and outer chaos. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person aligned with reason becomes foreign to those ruled by impulse. That foreign feeling creates discomfort. Discomfort looks like judgment. Judgment turns into resentment. And resentment quietly becomes dislike. You did not change into something worse. You changed into something harder to control. Here is the unsettling part. Most people do not hate you. They hate what you represent. You represent discipline in a world addicted to excuses. You represent calm in a culture fueled by outrage. You represent self-respect in spaces built on approval. And when that mirror appears, it exposes cracks people work very hard to hide. Think about it. When you stop oversharing, people call you distant. When you stop reacting, they call you cold. When you stop explaining yourself, they call you arrogant. None of those labels are about you. They are emotional defenses. Seneca warned that people attack what reminds them of their own weakness. Comparison stings more than insult. Silence screams louder than words. And your restraint becomes an accusation they never asked for. This is why the energy shifts first, not the words. Energy never lies. Your presence no longer feeds their habits. You are not gossiping. You are not seeking validation. You are not spiraling with them. That creates an imbalance. And humans hate imbalance because it forces choice. Either rise to your level or push you away. Most choose distance. Here comes the trap. When you feel that coldness, the instinct is to fix it, to explain, to soften, to shrink. Stoicism says this is the moment your character is tested. Epictetus taught that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Translation for today: if you want peace, you must be willing to be misunderstood. Notice how this hits emotionally: the loneliness, the self-doubt, the late-night replaying of conversations. Stoicism does not deny that pain. It gives it meaning. The pain is proof that you are no longer outsourcing your worth. And when approval is removed, those who lived off it feel threatened. Understand this clearly. You are not being punished. You are being filtered. Stoics believed life removes what is unnecessary when you align with virtue. As your standards rise, tolerance for chaos drops. Some people only connected with the old version of you because it made them comfortable. When comfort disappears, so does the connection. That loss feels personal, but it is structural. This is where most people break. They mistake rejection for failure. Stoicism reframes it as feedback, not feedback about your worth, but about your direction. Are you acting from reason or reaction? Every strange look is a signal. Every cold response is data, and data to a Stoic is power. There is also envy hiding beneath the surface, not loud envy, quiet envy, the kind that smiles while resenting your progress. Your self-control highlights their lack of it. Your boundaries remind them of promises they abandoned. That gap creates shame. Shame seeks relief, and the easiest relief is turning you into the villain. Once labeled, they feel justified. Distance becomes moral. Coldness feels earned, and you are left wondering how growth became a crime. This confusion is the fog before clarity, and clarity is where Stoic strength is forged. It hurts, but pain sharpens perception, stripping illusions and preparing you for the next decisive choice ahead that will define your future path forward. But this is only the first layer. Because calm does something far more dangerous than confidence. Calm exposes inner disorder, and once that happens, reactions escalate. Passive aggression, subtle digs, strange hostility. And that leads to the most important question you must answer next. Do you stay centered? Or do you step back into chaos just to be accepted? Here is the uncomfortable truth most people never say out loud. Your calm is not neutral. It is provocative. The moment you stop reacting the way people expect, you stop being predictable, and unpredictability makes insecure people nervous. Or calm removes leverage, calm removes control, calm removes the emotional buttons others use to press without thinking. Stoicism calls this apatheia, not apathy, mastery. It means your emotions answer to reason, not to the room. And when that happens, something subtle but powerful shifts. People who thrived on emotional exchange suddenly feel unemployed. Their old tools stop working. The jokes don't land. The guilt trips bounce off. The drama goes unanswered. And instead of asking why they feel unsettled, they aim the discomfort at you. Notice how it escalates. First comes confusion, then suspicion, then quiet resistance. You'll feel it in the tone, short replies, forced politeness, backhanded compliments. Stoics understood this pattern centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius warned that people resent what they cannot manipulate. When your emotional state becomes self-governed, others lose access. And loss of access feels like rejection, even if you never rejected them. Here is where tension builds. You may start questioning yourself. Am I being too distant, too serious, too different? Stoicism teaches you to pause right there. That question is the doorway back into approval seeking. Epictetus said if you want to be free, you must stop needing others to confirm your freedom. The moment you chase clarity from confused people, you hand your power back. Most people live emotionally exposed. Their moods depend on reactions. Their identity depends on feedback. When you show up grounded, unbothered, and consistent, it creates contrast. Contrast creates self-awareness, and self-awareness for someone avoiding themselves feels like attack. So they defend, they gossip, they project, they frame you as the problem, so they don't have to face their reflection. Let's be clear, this is not about arrogance. True Stoic calm is quiet. It does not announce itself. That is why it's so disturbing. There is no drama to fight, no argument to win. No emotional chaos to match, just presence, just steadiness. And that steadiness exposes how unstable the environment really is. This is where people start rewriting the story about you. They'll say you changed. They'll say you think you're better now. They'll say you're cold or distant. None of that is evidence. It's interpretation. Stoicism teaches that people judge through their own wounds. Their opinions are not verdicts, they are confessions. Here's the psychological twist. When you don't react, people feel unseen. And feeling unseen triggers fear. Fear wants reassurance. But Stoicism refuses to perform. You don't rush to explain, you don't over-clarify, you don't chase understanding. You stay aligned with your values. That silence feels loud to those who live through noise. And that is when dislike hardens into hostility. Not always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle exclusion. Sometimes it's fake concern. Sometimes it's smiling disrespect. Stoics expected this. Seneca wrote that the road to virtue is lonely because it removes you from the crowd, not physically, spiritually. You're still there, but you're not vibrating at the same frequency. This is the test most people fail. They break their calm to prove their goodness. They defend themselves to clear their name. They explain their boundaries to people who never respected them. Stoicism warns against this trap. Your character does not need defense. It needs consistency. Time reveals truth better than argument ever could. You must also understand something critical. When people dislike you without reason, it often means you stop being useful to their dysfunction. You're no longer validating excuses. You're no longer feeding chaos. You're no longer rescuing emotions that were never yours to manage. That loss feels personal to them, but it's structural to you. There is power here if you can hold it. Power in restraint, power in silence, power in not correcting every misunderstanding. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he would meet ungrateful, dishonest, and envious people, not because they are evil, but because they don't know any better. That perspective keeps you from internalizing their reaction. Still, the tension remains. Because staying calm does not mean staying untouched. You feel the distance, you feel the shift, and a deeper question starts forming beneath the surface. If your growth costs you relationships, is it worth the price? Stoicism does not answer lightly, because the next truth cuts even deeper. Some people must lose access to you for you to fully become who you are meant to be, and that realization changes everything. There is a moment of clarity that feels more like grief than growth. It happens when you realize some people were never walking with you. They were leaning on you, and the second you stood upright, they lost balance. Stoicism prepares you for this moment, but it never pretends it is painless. Here is the truth most people avoid. Not everyone in your life wants you strong. Some only want you available. Available for their complaints, their chaos, their emotional unloading. When you develop boundaries, those connections strain. Not because you did something wrong, but because the agreement changed without discussion. And unspoken agreements always break loudly. Stoics believed every relationship is an exchange, not always material, often emotional. When you stop providing a certain emotional currency, people feel cheated. They call it betrayal, you call it self-respect. Epictetus warned that if you seek freedom, you must accept the loss of those who benefit from your chains. That sentence alone explains why growth feels isolating. This is where resentment takes shape. People begin keeping mental score. They remember the old you, the version that replied instantly, explained endlessly, absorbed moods. They compare it to the present you, quieter, selective, centered. That comparison hurts them. Seneca noted that comparison, not injury, is the root of most anger, and anger always needs a target. Notice how the story about you evolves. At first, they say you're busy, then they say you're distant, then they say you're changed. Finally, they decide you're selfish. This progression protects their self-image. If you're selfish, they don't have to ask why they depended on you so much. If you're cold, they don't have to face how emotionally demanding they were. Stoicism teaches you to observe this without reacting. Observation is power, reaction is surrender. Marcus Aurelius advised watching human behavior like a natural event. Rain falls, fire burns, people project. None of it is personal unless you make it personal. Still, the emotional weight builds. You feel misunderstood, misjudged, sometimes even abandoned. This is where many people panic and revert. They lower boundaries, they re-explain, they give access back just to restore familiarity. Stoicism calls this a failure of endurance, not strength. Endurance, the ability to sit with discomfort without betraying your principles. Here is the paradox. The more grounded you become, the more obvious others' instability feels, not to judge, but to recognize. You start seeing patterns you once ignored. Emotional manipulation disguised as concern, guilt framed as loyalty, drama mislabeled as honesty. When you stop participating, the illusion breaks, and illusions breaking always create enemies. This is also where envy quietly sharpens its edge. Not envy of your success, envy of your peace. Peace is threatening because it cannot be taken, it must be built. When people see you less reactive, less needy, less shaken, it reminds them of work they avoided. That reminder hurts, and hurt often chooses blame over accountability. Stoicism never tells you to confront envy. It tells you to outgrow it. You do that by staying aligned with what is within your control, your thoughts, your actions, your responses. The rest belongs to others. Epictetus said, "If it is not yours to govern, let it go." Most suffering comes from refusing that boundary. There is also fear on their side. When you stop engaging emotionally, people fear abandonment. Even if you are still present, even if you are still kind, your emotional independence signals that you don't need them to be okay. And need is how many people measure importance. Without it, they feel replaceable. That fear turns into hostility faster than logic ever could. So what do? Stoicism does not advise confrontation for validation. It advises quiet consistency. You don't explain your growth. You don't argue your boundaries. You live them. Over time, two things happen. Some people adjust, others fade. Both outcomes are necessary. This is the stage where loneliness peaks, because the old connections weaken before new ones form. Stoics understood this valley well. They believed virtue isolates before it attracts. The mind must clear space before it can align with higher companionship. That space feels empty, but it is not punishment, it is preparation. And here is the sharpest realization yet. Some people dislike you now because they can no longer use you. And that is not your problem to solve. It is your responsibility to accept. Acceptance is not bitterness, it is clarity. Clarity frees energy. Energy builds a life aligned with reason instead of reaction. But one question still lingers. How do you stay kind without becoming weak? How do you stay open without inviting chaos back in? Stoicism has an answer, but it demands discipline, and it begins with understanding the difference between compassion and compliance. That distinction changes everything. Here is where most people get it wrong. They think Stoicism means emotional walls, cold distance, shutting people out. That is not Stoic strength. That is fear disguised as control. Real Stoicism is sharper. It teaches compassion without surrender, kindness without self-betrayal. And this is exactly why some people struggle with the new version of you. Compassion, to a Stoic, is understanding human weakness without becoming responsible for it. Compliance is absorbing that weakness and calling it love. When you stop complying, people feel rejected even if you are still compassionate. This is the line that confuses them. And confusion often turns into dislike. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should love people while accepting that they act out of ignorance. Love does not mean agreement. It means clarity. When you no longer argue, justify, or rescue, you are practicing respect. Respect for yourself. Respect for reality. But those used to emotional labor will experience that respect as abandonment. Here is the tension. You still care. You still listen. You still show up. But you don't absorb. You don't fix. You don't chase. That restraint unsettles people who depended on emotional access. They begin testing boundaries, subtle comments, emotional bait, guilt wrapped in nostalgia. This is where your discipline is tested hardest. Stoicism calls this moment the training ground. Epictetus said every encounter is a chance to practice virtue. When someone tries to pull you back into old patterns, that is not an attack, it is an exam. Will you react from habit or respond from principle? Notice how dislike often intensifies when you remain calm under pressure. People expect escalation, defensiveness, emotion. When they don't get it, they push harder. This is not cruelty, it is confusion. They are searching for the old version of you, and when they can't find it, frustration grows. This is also when manipulation becomes more obvious, not always malicious, sometimes desperate. Phrases like, "You've changed," or "You don't care anymore," are not observations. They are invitations to prove otherwise. Stoicism teaches you to decline politely. You don't argue the label. You don't overcorrect. You let your actions speak over time. Here is the hard emotional truth. Being emotionally regulated makes you less entertaining, less dramatic, less reactive, and some people only bonded with you through intensity. When intensity disappears, so does the illusion of closeness. That loss feels personal to them, but it is structural to growth. Stoics believed in choosing virtue over comfort, and virtue is uncomfortable in emotionally chaotic spaces. You begin to see how much of social bonding is based on shared dysfunction, shared complaints, shared outrage, shared avoidance. When you step out of that, the bond weakens, not because you broke it, but because it was never built on stability. At this stage, self-doubt tries one last time. You wonder if being calm is costing you warmth, if boundaries are turning you into someone unapproachable. Stoicism answers this directly. Warmth without boundaries is exhaustion. Boundaries without warmth is isolation. And accepting that not everyone will understand the difference. This is where dignity becomes your anchor. Dignity is quiet. It does not demand recognition. It does not chase reassurance. It holds posture under pressure. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to act rightly and let others think what they will. That mindset removes the emotional hook others try to use. And here's the twist most people don't expect. When you stop reacting, some people will actually escalate their dislike. Louder opinions, sharper judgments. Why? Because your silence denies them closure. They want a scene, a resolution, a story where they are justified. Calm refuses to participate, and that refusal feels like losing control. This is the phase where Stoicism asks you to trust time. Time exposes motives. Time reveals character. Time softens misunderstandings that were never meant to be resolved through words. You don't need to explain your growth to people committed to misunderstanding it. But staying calm does not mean staying passive. There is a difference. Stoicism teaches strategic distance. You choose where to invest energy. You reduce exposure to emotional chaos. not as punishment, as hygiene. Just like you avoid polluted air, you avoid polluted dynamics. Because once you step into this clarity, you face the final fear. The fear that if you fully embrace who you are becoming, some people will never come with you. Stoicism does not soften that truth. It prepares you to carry it with strength. Because what comes next is not isolation, it is alignment. And alignment changes who enters your life next. There is a quiet shift that happens when you stop trying to be understood by everyone. It doesn't arrive with relief at first. It arrives with emptiness. Fewer messages, fewer invitations, more silence. And in that silence, a fear whispers, what if this is it? What if I end up alone? Stoicism does not dismiss that fear. It challenges the assumption behind it. Stoics believed loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of alignment. When you remove misaligned connections, the space feels cold before it feels clean. That discomfort tempts you to refill it quickly, to accept familiarity over integrity. But Stoicism warns that rushing to fill space is how old patterns return disguised as new opportunities. This is the stage where many people relapse into approval seeking. They compromise boundaries to feel connected again. They tolerate disrespect for company. They trade peace for presence. Stoicism calls this a false bargain. Seneca wrote that it is better to walk alone than with those who lead you away from yourself. Here is the deeper truth. When people start hating you for no reason, it is often because you stopped orbiting their needs. And when you stop orbiting, gravity changes. The system reorders. Some bodies drift away, others draw closer, but nothing stays the same. In this quiet phase, you begin to notice something powerful. Your energy stabilizes, your mind clears. You are less reactive, not because you are numb, but because you are no longer constantly adjusting to others. This internal steadiness becomes a filter. People who thrive on chaos lose interest. People who value substance lean in. Stoicism teaches that character attracts its own kind, but not immediately. First, it tests you. Can you hold your values without applause? Can you trust your direction without confirmation? Marcus Aurelius wrote that the approval of others adds nothing to a life lived according to reason. That line becomes real only when approval is removed. This is also when resentment tries to sneak in. You might catch yourself thinking, after everything I gave, this is how they treat me. Stoicism stops that spiral quickly. Expectation is the root of resentment. You gave because you chose to, not because you were owed loyalty in return. Release the invoice. Peace returns faster when debts are cancelled internally. As time passes, something subtle changes. The hostility fades, not because they suddenly understand you, but because you are no longer accessible. Distance reduces friction, the opinions lose heat, and you realize something surprising. Their dislike had less to do with you than with the role you stopped playing. This is where Stoicism reframes loss as liberation. You are no longer performing emotional labor without consent. You are no longer managing perceptions. You are no longer bending to maintain comfort. That freedom is not loud. It is stable, and stability is addictive in the best way. Then comes the unexpected reward. New connections appear, not many, but real. People who don't demand explanations, who respect silence, who don't need you to prove your worth through availability. These connections feel different, slower, cleaner, less intense, more solid. Stoics valued this quality over quantity. You begin to understand why the old connections couldn't come with you. They were built on versions of you that no longer exist, and you cannot live in a past identity to preserve someone else's comfort. That realization ends the inner conflict. But there is still one final challenge: confidence, not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind that does not seek validation, the kind that remains steady when disliked. Stoicism teaches that confidence rooted in character is unshakable, because it does not depend on mood, praise, or consensus. This is the moment when people's dislike loses its power. You no longer ask why. You no longer internalize it. You see it for what it is: a reaction to your growth, a byproduct of your boundaries, a signal that you are no longer available for dysfunction. And here is the most important realization yet. When people hate you for no reason, it is often the universe confirming that you are on the right path. Resistance appears where alignment begins, not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer adjustable. But Stoicism has one final lesson before the story ends. Strength without humility becomes isolation. Peace without purpose becomes emptiness. To finish this path correctly, you must integrate your calm with meaning. And that final integration changes everything. There is a subtle danger that appears once you master calm. It is not chaos. It is detachment without direction. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. And if you are not careful, that stillness can drift into indifference. Stoicism warns against this, because the goal was never to withdraw from life. The goal was to engage with life wisely. True Stoic strength is not emotional absence. It is intentional presence. You are calm, not because you don't care, but because you choose where to care. This distinction matters. Without it, growth turns into isolation, and isolation over time hardens the spirit. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he was born for cooperation, even while accepting that many people would misunderstand him. Stoicism is not about avoiding people. It is about relating to them without losing yourself. When people begin to dislike you, the temptation is to close off entirely. Stoicism asks for something harder. Stay open, stay principled, stay selective. Here is where humility becomes essential, not the kind that shrinks, the kind that stabilizes. Humility reminds you that others act from their level of awareness. Their reactions are not moral verdicts, they are expressions of internal struggle. When you see that clearly, resentment dissolves, and without resentment you stay human. This is also where purpose enters the picture. Calm without purpose feels empty. Purpose gives calm direction. Stoics believed the highest good was living in accordance with reason and contributing to the common good. That means your growth is not just for personal peace. It is to show what grounded behavior looks like in a reactive world. People may dislike you because you don't join in outrage, because you don't escalate conflict, because you don't reward drama. Over time, that presence becomes instructive, not through preaching, through example. Some will quietly adjust. Others will continue to resist. Both outcomes are beyond your control. This is where the Stoic principle of amor fati applies. Love your fate, even the parts that include misunderstanding, even the parts that include being disliked. Not because it feels good, but because it sharpens your character. Resistance builds strength. Ease builds comfort. Stoicism chooses strength. You also learn to separate respect from affection. Not everyone will like you, but many will respect you. And respect is quieter, less expressive, less performative. It shows up as consistency, as boundaries honored, as trust over time. Stoics valued respect far more than popularity. At this stage, you stop interpreting every reaction as a signal. You don't overanalyze. You don't personalize silence. You don't chase warmth from people committed to misunderstanding you. That restraint frees mental energy, and that energy gets redirected into work, craft, health, discipline, areas fully within your control. This is the moment when inner authority replaces external approval. You know who you are. You know why you act the way you do, and you no longer need consensus to validate that. Epictetus said that if you want to be invincible, make peace with the idea of being disliked for the right reasons. Something interesting happens here. The same calm that once triggered hostility now attracts curiosity, not from everyone, but from those paying attention. They notice you don't react impulsively, you don't defend unnecessarily, you don't gossip. That restraint stands out in a culture addicted to noise. And even if no one ever acknowledges it, your life improves. Less drama, clearer focus, stronger self-trust. Stoicism measures success internally. If your nights are quieter and your mind is steadier, you are winning, regardless of who approves. But before this journey concludes, there is one final illusion to confront. The belief that you must choose between peace and connection. Stoicism rejects that false choice. The truth is more precise. You must choose quality over quantity, alignment over access, depth over familiarity. When people start hating you for no reason, it is often the final stage of a transformation they were never prepared for. And that is okay. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to live well. The last step is acceptance, not passive acceptance, mature acceptance. The kind that lets you move forward without dragging old judgments with you. When you reach that point, the question of why they dislike you loses relevance, because you finally understand something freeing. Their reaction was never the point. There is a moment when everything clicks into place, not dramatically, not emotionally. Quietly, you realize you no longer need to understand why certain people dislike you. The question dissolves on its own. And in that silence, something stronger takes its place: self-trust. Stoicism teaches that peace does not come from fixing perception. It comes from releasing attachment to it. Once you accept that being disliked is sometimes the cost of being aligned, you stop negotiating with your values. You stop trimming yourself to fit rooms that were never built for your growth. Marcus Aurelius wrote that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Dislike is just information, neutral, incomplete, often distorted. When you remove the story around it, what remains cannot harm you. Someone's opinion cannot reach your character unless you invite it inside. This is the final evolution. You stop measuring your life by social temperature. You measure it by internal order. Are you acting with integrity? Are your choices deliberate? Are your responses disciplined? If the answer is yes, then you are already ahead, regardless of who approves. You also begin to see the irony. The same people who once reacted to your calm eventually adapt or fade into irrelevance. Their emotions move on. Yours do not. Because Stoicism anchored you internally. What once felt like rejection now feels like alignment completing itself. This is not emotional detachment. This is emotional maturity. You still feel, you still care, but you no longer bleed from every misunderstanding. You no longer explain yourself to people who benefit from misinterpreting you. You no longer chase harmony at the cost of self-respect. And something else happens. You become harder to manipulate. Guilt loses leverage. Shame loses power. Drama loses appeal. Your time becomes intentional. Your energy becomes protected. Your mind becomes quieter. That is the real reward Stoicism offers, not invulnerability, stability. At this point, you understand the title of this video on a deeper level. If people start hating you for no reason, this is why. Because you stopped feeding what never nourished you. Because you chose discipline over distraction. Because you chose principle over popularity. Stoicism never promised ease. It promised clarity, and clarity is demanding. It requires you to accept being misunderstood without rushing to correct it. It requires you to let go of versions of yourself others were attached to. It requires you to stand firm while narratives shift around you. But the payoff is undeniable. You gain something rare in the modern world. Inner authority. You no longer outsource your worth. You no longer wait for emotional permission to live well. You move forward with intention, not reaction. And here is the final truth. People who dislike you for no reason are often responding to a boundary they can't cross anymore. That boundary is not hostility, it is self-command. And self-command quietly changes the trajectory of your life. Stoicism teaches that you were not meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to be steady, useful, just, and free from unnecessary suffering. When you understand that, dislike loses its sting. It becomes background noise to a life lived deliberately. So if you feel the shift right now, the distance, the coldness, the strange energy when you walk into a room, do not rush to fix it, observe it, learn from it, and continue forward without bitterness. Because the person you are becoming does not need universal approval. They need integrity, and that is something no one can take from you. If this perspective resonated with you, support the mission. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to Stoic Origin for more timeless wisdom grounded in Stoicism and real life.